Dane Rose here, week number 29 in our 52-week project of accelerated growth and well-being. And this is one of my favorite topics because it's not only so powerful, but the goal is a worthy one. In that old joke, the worst thing to do is rapidly climb the ladder, only to discover when you get to the top that it's leaning against the wrong wall. This is like choosing a career we're not all that suited for or not that in love with, and rapidly climbing that corporate ladder only to find that we should have been doing something else. Speed is not an ally until we're pointed in the right direction. Efficiency is not as potent as effectiveness, and efficiently going in the wrong direction is the worst thing of all. So we have invoke your best selves. Now, what is your best self? Well, what I want to suggest is that we each have a probability field, a range that is our probable self. And that depending on how this probability field intersects with the environment, like if we have an environment up here, we kind of hit this part of our probable selves. If we're lower down on the environment, if we have an environment that's down here, not as well suited to us, then it hits this part. Now, here's the best way to understand what I'm getting at. You all know the experience of an incredibly kind, courteous, ethical, hardworking, generous human being who, after being left in the rain, when the taxi wasn't there, after the luggage arrived late, after being told by 3 different airline officials to go, could you just please go here? No, that's not the right desk, go here. And absolutely no one is interested in their state of mind, in how exhausted they are, the fact they've got an appointment, the fact that they've got kids that need this and that. And this is an environment that is an absolutely horrible environment for this individual. And so the probability field within each human being is relatively static. Like you and I, as we stand here right now, have a relatively static probability field, meaning if just the right person comes up and approaches us in just the right way, we are at our absolute best. And if just the wrong person approaches us in just the wrong way, we are at an absolute worst. But it doesn't fall below here. And it doesn't go above here. Like, even if angels started descending from the sky and harps started playing, we don't go above, here. We don't start glowing or anything like that. And even if, our luggage gets lost, the precious jewelry we just bought that was so important got stolen, people start running us around, and we are at our absolute wit's end. Even if we start shouting, you miserable excuse for an airline, official, da-da-da-da-da, we still don't go below a certain number. Like, most of us have never murdered someone. Most of us, we could have the absolute worst customer experience ever, and if we went so far as losing it and slapping someone in the face and saying wake up and pay attention, we immediately feel, oh, I'm so sorry, I just lost it there. And and it doesn't descend into I'm going to roast you in hell for 1,000,000,000 years, as in the Christian God's, curse of whoever doesn't do what he says. We have a lower threshold. And we know ourselves on this whole continuum. And of course, when you realize that I have this potential, like I can be a very boring person when I'm talking with this group, and I can be a very interesting person when I'm talking with this group. I can feel alive and vital when I'm engaging with this woman. I can feel depressed and dread when I'm engaging with this woman. I'm using that as a man because the deep chemistry of attraction is a very powerful force, and I'm heterosexual, so I'm going to feel the strongest with a woman. Now, the probability is set. The environment, which is kind of the alchemy, the environment determines which part of us is being accessed. You all know that feeling where I have it with my girlfriend. She has a list of daily responsibilities that she likes to check off and make sure that she's doing, not all of which are particularly fun. They're just important responsibilities. And then there are other things that are fun. And, and sometimes I'll ask her, how's it going? Did you get this done or that done? And she'll say, oh, I'm too tired. And, if I say, well, I was going to go out for a ride on the motorbike and, have an Americano and a bit of, fresh made gelato, but I'll, why don't you stay here and rest since you're so tired? And she'll flip around and no, I've got energy for that. So what's happening there is in the environmental level, typing away at a responsibility is, relatively speaking, more exhausting for her than, cool air on a motorbike and, and also, getting to spend time with someone you really enjoy. And so different tasks, different people, different contexts evoke a different point on the probability field. Now, there's two ways then that we can increase what we might call a peak experience, an experience of being at our peak, which I think is even more significant than witnessing a reality peak. Now, what I mean by that is you can be in a pretty low state, like, I'm depressed, I'm irritable, I'm fuming about what this person says, so you're kind of down in your bottom 20% probability field. And you can go to an event like a Cirque du Soleil show, which is, a peak reality event. I love those shows. And from there, this state will not be so miserable. You'll not dwell on it quite so much. You'll even forget how unfair the world is, etc., for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Then you go back, oh, it's still very unfair, but gosh, these acrobats are amazing. And so you're in your lower point on your continuum, but you're witnessing a peak reality. You're bringing a relatively low energy, low resonance to a peak experience. I'm going to suggest that it's much more satisfying and a bigger accomplishment, much more enjoyable to bring a high state of exuberance, joy, beauty, acceptance. It's all right. It's going to be okay. This is a great life. I love it. It's much more satisfying to bring this peak state in our probability field of the full range of our personality to a relatively low reality. Yeah, okay. I'm here at a soccer game. I'm witnessing a coach bullying and shaming another set of kids. But you know what? I was shamed and bullied by my football coach, and it's all going to be okay. You know, these kids, if and when they're ready, are going to get beyond that. This is a stage. It's a stage in our human evolution. It's a stage in emotional development within my country. It is an evolutionary stage of my culture. It's a blind spot, and yet the human spirit is amazing, isn't it? It just transcends. I mean, even this, with all the things those kids are going through, you know, the sugar, the shaming, the poor and inconsistent boundaries, the secrets that get blocked up and the thing that get blamed on them when they're really nothing to do with them, the lies they get told for political reasons. With all of that, just look at the beauty of human beings that manages to erupt through that chaos of prism-like distractions and obstructions, and that's remarkable. And I feel great. So this is high state interacting with a low environment. And then you have the low state interacting with a high environment, such as, they say, you know, a wonderful New Year's Eve party, a wedding, a fireworks display, you know, something that is so hard to suffer around and so easy to enjoy. And of course, the sweet spot is a high state in a high environment where, you know, you feel great and you're able to access your best self. And the environment supports that. You don't feel like you're going crazy. Wait a minute, you know, I'm hooligans on the news, this and that. Why am I so happy? You actually feel like you have a reason to be at your best. And you are at your best to show up for a given reality, to honor that state. And so what I want to talk about is how to make this process a little bit more conscious. Now, the first part of that consciousness is realizing that your probability field is relatively static, meaning you have a best self. Let's say there's you that's the most generous you've ever been. There's you that's the most joyful you've ever been. There's you that is just overcome with beauty and acceptance more than you've ever been. And there's you that's in love with the world, in love with yourself, in love with your partner as much as you've ever been. Maybe you've never had that, you know, before. But you have an upper ceiling that you can every so often. For example, there's certain parts that people access when they're drunk. There's certain parts that people access when they're high. But they have that sense like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, sure, I feel everything's great when I'm high. I never feel that normally. You know, that's actually a good example of environment, meaning new chemicals are in your body. So that's part of your probability field, meaning like anytime this particular substance of caffeine and sugar and this and that, it can create this state. Or anytime you have an orgasm, you know, that releases these chemicals within the brain, you can have this state. But it's your peak state. And then you have those times when you absolutely hate yourself, when you hate the world, when you feel, you know, despair and and, you know, it's so dark you don't even want to look at it, you know, and that's the low range. And so this is like the internal geography. And what I want you to imagine is that each of these things have a phone number that an environment dials in. So you kind of have a high range, then you go into kind of deep negative, etc. And I want you to imagine that the environment, everything that affects you that's going on in your world, everything, dials in your state. You know, that when the environment is like this, it's the equivalent of hitting 8-0, and it connects with you in this state. And when, you know, your teenage daughter calls you up to tell you what a shit you are, you know, that's dialing negative 2.0, you know, negative 2.0, okay, oh my gosh, you know, I have to go through this whole cycle of stuff. And when, you know, my boss calls to tell me how much he appreciates the extra work and da-da-da, and he calls me at home and just lets me know that he cares about me, that's a point, you know, positive 5.0, and I just feel like, ooh, you know, that's just great, and that kind of lasts the entire weekend. So these are intersection points between environment and your range of probability. And so if you know that you're always this way, meaning you could be a complete son of a bitch, but you're not a complete son of a bitch because you take responsibility for creating the kind of environment that brings out you at 30 plus. And when you fall below 30 plus, you pause, you integrate, you start fiddling with the variables until you can present yourself as 30 plus. You know, it's a bad day, but let's just get on with this. You know, that may be the low point where you express that to others. You know, for others, it's much lower. You miserable son of a bitch, da, 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 da. We got to get this, and this. You know, and then the company's cash flow increases, and then the boss calms down, and you know, okay, so sorry about that. Now we can operate at this threshold and above. But anytime, you know, we're in the red and the company could go bankrupt, you're going to see an absolute critical shaming demon, you know, out there, because I've got that part in me. It just only comes out when I think, you know, I may lose everything, you know, if that makes sense. So I want to suggest that all of us have a positive and negative range, and that what ultimately makes people who are highly positive and successful appear highly positive and constructive and successful is that these people are more successful at shaping the environment that intersects with their best quality. And this is a really profound thing to consider, because if the people you admire the most and want to be more like are in fact not better people than you, not worse people than you, but they are more effective at shaping their environment to intersect with them in a way that brings out their best side, then the obvious response to that observation is that it is critical to take charge of our environment. Now, as I'm saying this, you know, I'm reminded of paradox. I've actually done a whole blog on useful truths, and so this is kind of designed to be watched in order. And so if you remember that video in which I talked about how to evaluate the usefulness of a statement like this, I think of someone like Nelson Mandela, who had a pretty shitty environment and yet was able to access, a relatively high state, at least of behavior. And this is another thing to understand, that there's the state of our actions, and then there's the state of our emotions. And some people have a lot of self-discipline and a lot of character, and so they may feel complete despair and frustration. I'd like to be leading my people, instead I'm in a prison for 27 years. As soon as I make friends with this guard and start to have some companionship, they specifically changed the guard because there was companionship. And so now here's someone we pick that we think will hate you, and okay, so fine, now they like you, so okay, let's get a new guard in. And just doing this, like, there's no way to win, year after year after year. And so emotionally, there might be complete disgust and despair with humanity, with this kind of atrocity. I mean, it's outrageous. But in the behavior, there may be the discipline to patiently, carefully begin again, and begin doing, putting first things first, treating people with respect, etc., whatever is Mandela's guiding principles. I'm really looking forward to reading one of his biographies recommended by Richard Branson, in one of his books that I've enjoyed recently. And so the behavior, may be more, maybe completely out of sync. You want to kill the guy, but you smile and you say, it must be tough being a prison guard. And I'm sorry you couldn't get a better job. I mean, one of the funny things about being a prison guard, it's been commented that the only person who's in prison longer than just about any prisoner is the warden. So the warden has to keep, that's their life, showing up, locking people in, holding the fence. The warden is in prison for an entire career. Most people just come in for a few years. And so in that sense, with awareness of paradoxes like that, as I said, Mandela seeming to maintain a relatively high state in some pretty terrible conditions. There are even people that seem to function at their best in crisis, and different biological reasons for that, one of them being the traumatic response. But for most of us, the way we feel inside and the way we behave in day number one, where the lover you're most excited with pays you a compliment, smiles at you, wants to spend time with you, your boss gives you a raise, several people say nice things about you, you visit a beautiful garden and you're served a fantastic, 7-course meal of your favorite food, and it arrives on time and there's no parking issue, and you have day number one, and then you have day number two. You get fired. The person where you're most interested in insults you and wants nothing to do with you. The office staffs are gossiping about how it's all your fault. You have financial problems. You go to the food, it's not what you ordered, it's disgusting. And you're eating in a dump in lousy traffic, and you couldn't even find a parking place. And you look at those 2 days, and if you're like me, or most of us, the way you feel, the state that you access based on those 2 days are going to be night and day. You're going to be feeling ashamed, embittered. Why does it all have to happen right now? Self-pity, and in the latter day, and you're going to be feeling, I'm wonderful. This is great. I'm so glad the world finally understood, that I've deserved this all along, and here I am, and it's just going to get better from here. And so you have these two states that are induced on our probability field, our range of who we can be. And it's influenced. See, the difference between influence and control is environment influences us. And the way to look at this is headwind. Because we have our will. That's kind of like our jet engine. Imagine this is the jet engine on a 747. It can fly around 600 miles per hour, and it's jetting towards New York at 600 miles per hour, jetting forward. Now, you can have a tailwind that's 160 miles per hour, and you arrive early coasting along. This is environmental influence. And you can have a 200-mile front wind running into you, and you've got to just be jamming those engines at all they can possibly do, and you're going to come in late because the environment influences you. And the reason you can predict how late is because this has a fixed max propulsion. And this is a good way of looking at environmental states. You eat a nice, organic, healthy sandwich with just the right protein, etc. for breakfast. This gives you impetus and clarity. Because of that clarity, you're able to respond a little bit more effectively in the meeting. Because you responded effectively, the boss begins to lean your way in understanding where you're coming from, and away from someone else that was, saying, oh, we should do this other thing. Because you feel your boss's support, you now are a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more confident. Because others see the boss's support, you now are treated with more deference. You're in favor. Because you're in favor, people are more courteous. No, after you, let's do this. You get more done in that type of environment. And you arrive at the end of the day and you've got everything done, you feel great. This is influence. It is not control. Meaning the person who the boss, who had, a lollipop for breakfast and is, dealing with a protein, or an adrenal crash, and was flustered and stuff and didn't go their way, they still can work much harder. They can do meditation. They can do this to overcome the resistance, that's the momentum that's set in motion. But at a certain point, the influence overwhelms our abilities as individuals. What I mean by that is, this jet engine goes 600 miles an hour. Now, it will still arrive in New York with a 200 mile per hour headwind. But if the headwind gets up to 1,200 miles per hour, rather than 200 miles per hour, and its max thrust is 600 miles per hour, then the plane is actually flying full into that storm, going to be going backwards in Earth terms at 600 miles per hour. Because the influence of the environment is so strong. And this is where, in racial terms, in political terms, we talk about the importance of things such as school. It has an enormous impact on the probability field of each student, whether they go to a school that is properly funded, where teachers care about the teachers, where there's different textbooks, and the children feel cared about. In addition to the school, it makes an enormous difference. Like Rodney Dangerfield, one of our former great comedians, talked about going home, and it didn't matter what his scorecard said. His mother didn't want to see the report, and his feeling is like, who am I doing this for? As you're a 6-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, you don't have the framework to do great in school for the future. You're doing it to please your parents. That's your reference point. And if your parents don't care, that has an enormous influence on the probability field. It's the same with your emotions. If your parents want to understand why you feel the way you feel, and keep asking questions that make you feel significant the more you talk about your feelings. Statistically speaking, most people will open up and talk about their feelings. If a parent, on the other hand, is invested in hearing that their child feels this way and doesn't feel this way, and responds to that attachment by challenging, criticizing, or shaming the actual feelings of their child. Why aren't you feeling like that? Joey's feeling like that. Why are you feeling that? What's wrong with you that you have these feelings rather than the feelings I want you to have? Well, this, of course, destroys any trust in the relationship. And you get the teenager, how you doing? I'm fine. Nothing. I don't want to talk to you because you do not know how to talk to me about what's going on in a way that makes me feel understood, safer, and bigger. I feel smaller, misunderstood, and less safe the more I open up about what's going on. So I'm not going to open up. This is a reality. People love to be seen, and they love to be supported, and they love to be validated. Everyone does. Someone doesn't want to talk. It's because they do not expect that. And that's generated in the environment. So while in the theoretical term, you can say that the environment influences us, it does not control us. In practical terms, if you get a bill tomorrow for $1 million and you have $30,000 in debt, you get a medical bill for $1 million, the odds of you paying off the $30,000 in debt while taking care of a sick person, in all the anxiety and trauma of maybe losing them, and making the $1 million, is about 1 million to 1. Maybe it's 1 in 200 million of the people who can overcome that amount of influence and still make headway. And so environment is a very big deal. The way I like to see it is that the environment determines the statistics, and your willpower and choices determine which part of the statistic you fall in. So let's say this is an environment where 5% of the students go to college and 95% of them don't, and let's say a third of them, so 33%, end up in jail. So this is the environment. So the environment determines the statistics of the group. You determine which circle of that statistic you're in. So for example, you've got 100 people here, and 5% of them are going to go, 5 of them are going to go to college. Now, if you want to be part of the 5 in that environment, you have to work harder than 95 of the other kids. Now, whether you can do that will be affected by the amount of support of your parents, by who you have as a friend, by whether or not you're an addict, by whether or not the teacher is kind to you or not. by whether or not you have anyone in your family that's a role model that gives you a sense that it's possible. Each of these things will make it more or less likely that you're going to be one of those 5 in an environment that is so hostile to advancement and future education that only 5 children out of 100 end up in it. Now, you don't have to work very hard to be part of the 95% that aren't going to go to college. In fact, if helplessness, let's say you're dealing with trauma, in trauma, helplessness is the big killer. When you feel traumatized, in fear of your life, and are completely helpless to control the environment that will stop the danger, the feeling of helplessness becomes itself a traumatic feeling. And when so much is out of your control, you come home one day and your dog ate your paperwork, and because your mom doesn't care enough to keep the dog away. You come home another day and your brother's rolling joints with a bit of your paper, and you realize that even if you do everything you possibly can, you have a 95% of failure. And everyone's called you a failure your whole life. Do you have what it takes inside of you to become one of those 5 that try, knowing that there's a 95% chance that they will fail, and that in the absolute despair of that failure, there will be no comfort. There will be an "I told you so, you stupid idiot. Why did you even try? You'll never amount to anything." Do you know how much headwind that is for that jet engine? That jet engine has the same 600 mile per hour range as any other jet engine, but it may have 700 or 800 mile per hour winds coming right at it, and it may be losing ground while going at full force. It's essential to be humble to the influence of environment and to take responsibility for the honor many of us have. Like if you're watching these videos and you're watching, more than a couple of them, that means you have discretionary time. It means you have an internet connection. It means you have an electronic device. That's already putting you in the top 10% of people who don't have that discretionary time, who they may have a little bit, but they need to addict to something. This is not an addictive type of dialogue, because it takes energy, it takes emotion. If you're paying attention, you feel some of the pain for those kids. And you got to fortify your body so that it doesn't, oh gosh, that's just so miserable. So you're in the top 10%. And this is a great honor to be in this state where we can take control of our environment. Now, I would reference what you're going to learn back in the earlier blog on HSPs, highly sensitive people, and their biology. But here's what I want you to focus on for this exercise. I want you to learn through memory, through imagination, and through experimentation what environment brings out your best. Number 1. Now, what do I mean by environment? I mean timing. There's some interactions and conversations. Hey man, how's it going? How's it going? You got about 5 seconds. And you got about 5 seconds. And for some people, that is just dissociative. It's like, oh, hello. There's nothing. For other people, that's great. That's kind of the perfect rhythm. So timing, the duration of an interaction. For example, my peak interaction duration with another human being is about 4 hours. 4 to 6 hours is my peak interaction. So if I want to consciously create a phenomenal interaction with another human being, the first thing that I want to do is allow a 6-hour window of undivided, uninterrupted attention. Now, this is difficult in the United States. It's 10 times easier in Thailand. Guess where I'm at? I'm in Thailand. I have more of those interactions in a month than I do an entire year in the United States. Thus the tenfold greater increase in ease. So the duration of the interaction, the rhythm of the interaction, you know, how staccato and addictive is the rhythm? Again, you know, with many people in the West, you have a little lull in the conversation. You don't just sit there in beautiful silence for 5 minutes. You check your phone, you do this, you give the message that unless you pick up the pace, this is going to get boring and I'm going to leave. As opposed to other states where there's this magnanimity of abundance, where I'm here for you. We can be silent for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we can enjoy it. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. It's a different rhythm in the interaction. Do you interrupt the other person even before they've begun, finished talking? Or do you leave a long, languorous pause in case they have something more to say? And another long, languorous pause. And feel like we've got all the time in the world to listen to one another. And it's exquisite. Obviously, I'm someone who likes those languorous pauses. How spontaneous, is it? One of my friends has a dental ache, and I don't want to see her suffering, so I said, please, let's go to the dentist. And she said, can you take me to the dentist tomorrow? And I said, no, because I'm not sure what I'll be up to tomorrow, but I can take you to the dentist right now. And she said, sure. Closed up shop, hopped on my motorbike with me, and we headed off to the dentist. This is the spontaneity between call me in 2 weeks and we will make time to I have time right now. How about it? This is an environmental condition. As I say, this is 1,000 times more, or 1,000% more abundant in Thailand. Time of day. What time is it? Probably around 2 a.m., something around, then right now. Are you a night person, a morning person? And are you able to interact in your peak time? Or do you have to interact in your worst time? Because the culture you're in says everyone interacts in this time, and it just happens to be the peak time for some people and the worst time for someone else, but everyone interacts, and it's called a level playing field. It's not a level playing field. It tailors to the people who are at their best in that time frame. The same is true with spontaneity. If you're someone who's really clear about how you feel and what you want to do now, but you have no idea how you're going to feel and what you're going to want to do in 2 weeks, and you're in a culture where you try and do anything and they say, let's do it in 2 weeks, you have just put yourself outside your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is now. Anytime in the next hour, I'm completely confident. In fact, the next 20 minutes, if we can do it now, I'm a complete 100% yes. If we can do it tomorrow, it's about 50-50. Looks good. Weather's probably going to be all right. I can kind of get a sense of what will be happening then. But if we do it in a week, I have no idea. So if I say yes, I'm not feeling the yes. I'm just hoping that I will be the person I am now in a week. So when you have a culture that is so heavily booked that it takes at least 2 weeks to do every 6-hour visit, you have it tailored towards highly left-brain people who are maximizers, or who are pretending to be maximizers because the culture values maximizers. You're in a culture that gives you points for being busy. You ever heard of one of those cultures where being busy and looking busy, even if you don't have a clue what you're doing and where you're going, is automatically higher on the cultural status indicator than, no, I'm not busy, and no, I've got no plans, and no, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow or the next day. I'm just enjoying my day. Well, you ever know a culture that immediately downgrades the importance of that person and immediately upgrades the importance of the person and says, well, you know, I could squeeze you in November of 2020, but what I'd like you to do is call my executive assistant to make sure, and if I can fit you in, I would be delighted to. I have many important things to do, you understand. Oh, well, this clearly a highly organized person. Well, highly organized correlates in many cultures in the West with very valuable, as opposed to highly spontaneous, highly dynamic, highly emotional, feminine traits, leading to an assessment of peak value because of the aliveness. You know, do you ever notice that someone who arrives for a meeting scheduled 2 years in advance rarely does it with the vitality of, I was so excited when I heard that meeting and here we are, and as opposed to, what were we going to meet about? Yeah, that passed. Now I've changed jobs. I was going to meet with you about this, but then I changed other job, and then you did that. Okay, and then so we want to meet about that? No. I changed another project here, and you just spend the whole time talking about what's different in the intervening days, weeks, months, and years. So this is where timing is important. The location. How noisy is it? What's the culture? What's the ambiance? What's okay in that culture? And is that suitable for you? For example, I never prepare for these videos. It's more like, I've got a few minutes. It would be fun to get this out there. Let's swing the camera into its position and do one of these. And in cultures where it's about the spontaneity, of course, that ranks highly. In cultures where it's like, gosh, won't he ever comb his hair? Won't he? It's a little bit weaker. But it's, obviously I do better in a culture that is more spontaneous and content focused, more energy focused than on presentation focused, organized, perfect lighting and all that. If I had to do all that perfectly, it'd be just too boring and I wouldn't do it. So we have the location being, a very big thing. And one of those things can be the implication of the location. For example, if we meet at my house, I know where everything is. I am completely relaxed. I'm secure in the sound and this and this. If we meet at your house, there's a light suddenly going off and distracting me. You have a neighbor that has a weird light in their window. What does that mean? The dog rushes through. I didn't know you had a dog, but now is he going to bite me? He's barking. I'm disoriented in this environment. I'm a little disoriented in this environment. I'm overwhelmed in this environment. I'm at my worst. I hate traffic. And to get to your house at this time of day, I have to go through an hour, maybe 2. So by the time I arrive, am I going to be up here? Or am I going to be like, just give me half an hour. Just give me half an hour to get over the traffic. And how's that as a first meeting? If the emphasis is, like so many people do, they project the value of themselves based on how the person shows up for them. So if I arrive at someone's house and I'm exhausted and I don't want to make eye contact, I just want to have a little bit of a rest. This goes back to important things to understand about HSPs. are they going to say this is a complete dud? Whereas if they came over to my place, I'm all beaming, hooray, thank goodness you're here. I have this for you. I have this for you. If you need this, let me know. And I'm at my best because of the location. Obviously, in a very judgmental culture, it's intelligent to be at your best for a date, for example. So then you want to have a location that brings out the best in you, that taps in your range up here, as opposed to bringing out your range down here and trying to convince them, by the way, I do have this range, you're just never going to see the best of me until we get here. Though having said that, I'm in a relationship where we met at the lowest point I have ever been in my life. And one of the reasons I was so excited about the relationship and continue to be is that, this was due to environmental factors out of my control, pushing me down, down, down. I just felt under this huge mountain of environmental pressures. It had to do with being spiritually, psychically, sexually abused by a therapist who I paid to keep me safe while on my very first psychedelic experience, which just opened me up in the confusion of, the worst pain and the most beauty at the same. It was just, and then being lied to, and, it's just an absolute nightmare to try and integrate that experience in the midst of all that horror. So this brought me down, I felt hate like I've never felt. I felt despair like I've never felt. I felt lonely like I never felt. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, how do people deal with this? Why are people like, it's just so miserable. And so this, off the charts horrific experience brought me down into the lowest point. And I knew that unless I could create an environment that would start bringing out the best in me, that you can get into a tailspin where you're down at your lowest point and then you don't like yourself because you're down at your lowest point. So now you're at a lower point because now you don't like yourself. Then you feel you're trying to get to a higher point, but the environment is pushing you down. Then you feel helpless, and now you feel frustrated and angry at yourself that you're so helpless. So you just keep spiraling down. So I knew I needed an emergency resuscitation of environment. And so I got myself to the Philippines. And I contacted 100 women about creating the environment that I knew would help me lift. And I knew I was in emergency resuscitation mode. And so I was, in my very first letter, I said, this is what I need. I need someone with undivided attention, who likes deeply serene places, who is not afraid of painful and negative emotions, who is not expecting to be married, who is not expecting to have children, who is not looking for money. And you need to know this relationship is going to last a month. And you can be whoever you need to be, but let's meet first. I will pay all the expenses. We'll be going to these places and these places that I already know that I like. And I'm looking for someone for whom this is a deep yes. I don't want you to be doing this for me. This is what I can offer. These are the things I love talking about. These are the things I love doing. It would be nice if it was a sexual relationship, but that's going to be your call. And if it's not working for either one of us, just give me a day's notice, or I'll give you a day's notice. I'll fly you back to wherever we start from. And no harm done. Is there anyone for whom this is a big success? Because I did not want to feel like a burden. And I felt like a complete burden in my Western ecology, where people didn't want to talk about this stuff, and it was just pouring out of me. And so this lovely young woman, who, thank heavens, with the support of her family, I met her grandmother, her mother, her father, her siblings, and I kind of went over the whole thing. I met with them for a couple of hours. I said, does everyone understand this? Do you feel comfortable? And she was delighted. Yes, I can't wait to travel here and do this. And it changed the environment. So being in warm tropical water is calming the body. Being in a place where image didn't matter. When you see people, this person in rags, this person, hoeing in the field, this person living in a bamboo hut, this person, driving a 20-year-old motorbike, this person driving a Porsche, whatever. You realize I can be myself. I do not need to perform to be judged here. My presence is what is being judged here. So I'm in a location where I can be me. I'm with someone who isn't constantly telling me they've got more important things to do, they need to be somewhere else. I'm with someone who's experiencing joy. Like, oh, I've never done this. No, I haven't. Learning and growing. And so, so the location, the Philippines, Panglao Island, having a very clear contract so that I'm not feeling anxious, like, oh God, this person is going to be betrayed, what do they think that I want? I don't want any of that. I want real clarity. Meeting with the families so that I know there's going to be no family tension around this. Wonderful. Then the aesthetic that I wanted, I would rent the third floor, nicest suite, overlooking the water, away from all the noise. I'd have breakfast delivered in bed so that I wouldn't have to worry about what my face looked like if I was crying, and I could just, show up, and have the food brought to me every morning. Having food that was good. I designed the dishes with the kitchen staff, since I'm vegetarian and stuff, and I said, this, and this, and please just bring this all in a platter to my room. The smells were heavenly, ocean smells. I could just barely hear the surf. Temperate weather. And then the intention. No plans. Just being present, integrating, connecting. The rituals. Meditation, smoking a cigar, writing things, making videos, doing the occasional therapy appointment remotely. The protocols. Sleep as long as I want. And then what I found was an absolute joy was trying to make this woman happy. Just what would you like to do? To get outside myself. And I was just so grateful that it was so easy to make her happy. She was a genuinely excited, enthusiastic, happy person. And so it was almost impossible to lose. The group size, my favorite group size, 1. No distractions. Values, honesty, presence, creativity, growth, teaching her what I know and stuff like that. I love talking about this kind of stuff. Well, she was interested. So this created an environment that was way up here, a really peak environment. While my state from recent memories and experiences, started off down here. And so I was able to move my state up to about here. It's particularly difficult when you get abused in an ethical situation, in terms of these were professionals, which the more they hurt me, the more they let me know that they were a danger to other people, not just to me. So then, my typical protocol of, okay, let's move on. You are an environment that's bringing out the absolute worst in me. Let me get out of any relationship to you as quickly as possible, was muddied with the responsibility to do something about it. And so this created an internal tension, not bringing out the best in me. I like clear cut choices, not situations where the best thing for me would be to run like hell, and the best thing for other people would be for me to hang in there and see that these people are held accountable before they hurt someone else. Turned out they weren't even licensed. I didn't realize that. These types of things contribute to the spiral. It's like, why didn't I check their licenses? This and that. So this is the ritual of invoking your best self. Because if it can be done, in absolute hell, and this is one of the reasons I'm so fanatical about having reserves, cash reserves, low debt, this kind of thing, is because life is going to throw a curveball every now and then. And it's going to pull us all the way down. And if we have no reserves, no physical reserves, no financial reserves, no emotional reserves, no mental reserves, we've got nothing to do but just plummet into our worst possible state, which generally feels so miserable that then you can be have despair and stuff about not being able to get out of the state. So the use of this, and in terms of this exercise, for the week, is to learn what brings out the best in you. For example, food. If I have a 100% German rye bread toasted sandwich with miso, tahini, pickles, those are the three key ingredients. And it doesn't really matter what else. I can add tomatoes, I can add fresh dill, it's a nice taste. I can add fresh basil leaves, I can add lettuce, I can add some sliced cucumber and stuff. That doesn't matter. But if I will have pickles, miso, tahini, and toasted 100% German rye bread, I will have about 4 hours of solid energy. If I throw a poached egg in, it'll help, but not necessary. And so knowing what you need and what food brings out the best in you, and then if I want a real kind of soporific high, sorbet, espresso, a bit of a cigar, something like that creates a soporific high. But complete incompetence, I've done one of these videos in that soporific high. And, it's just hard to get in my body enough to know what I'm doing. But it's wonderful for dreaming and meditating. So, what kind of sounds, your perfect music, your perfect volume, your perfect temperature, what intentions bring out the best in you? Is it an intention of success, an intention of love, an intention of spiritual connection? The rituals, I'm really big on this in relationships, so I'll do some blog on some of the rituals, and I've touched on ways to bring out the best in relationships in some of the earlier blogs. But rituals are profound, and I'll just mention one, which I call the art of appreciation, where you take turns at the end of a visit, at the end of an evening, saying, I appreciate you for, and then whatever you notice, something, one sentence, one single item, and a thank you, then I appreciate you for one thing, one item. It sounds artificial for many people when they hear it. I don't care about how it sounds. 80% of people when we do this together, and particularly after the awkwardness of learning it the first time, when we close an encounter by appreciating at least 3 things each, it lifts the feeling of success, of safety, of, they like me, to double what it was before. And that's what I call a return on investment. Because if Warren Buffett could add a little bit of code to his investing algorithm that with just an extra 5% of energy would double his profit per dollar invested, he would be leaping for joy. He would pay $1 billion for that code because he's managing so many billions that if he can double his profits, that will be paid down in no time. But what's bizarre about the human being in relationship to more feminine type things, money being more masculine, relational and feelings being more feminine, is people will, bend over backwards, leap over all kinds of hurdles to increase their statistical returns in a hedge fund by 5%. And what's powerful in this terrain is if you use the right ritual, you will increase your resonance, your return on investment in a relationship by 50%. Free. You don't get a bill or anything. And the relationship costs, if you rent an apartment for 2 years, I'm in a 2-year lease right now in Phuket, the rent doesn't go up or down whether your enjoyment with your partner goes up or down. The rent is the same, the food costs the same, everything costs the same. The only variable is how much you're enjoying it. If you can do a little 2-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute thing and double your enjoyment, you are an absolute chauvinistic fool for thinking that somehow you're smarter or better for going out and tripling the amount you're paying on a lease to double the outer environment, which your brain in the hedonic adaptation principle is going to quickly discount, meaning you can buy an absolute penthouse, and I guarantee it, within about 3 months, you're no longer appreciating the fine stainless finishes, etc. It's just there. Yeah, whatever. Your brain has tuned it out. But when you do rituals of engagement, the variety in the human interaction, the variety of your moods, the variety of setting. I was out walking at midnight on the beach tonight. And, doing a ritual in that context. Then another one, midday or something, that lifts the energy. This is more important, and I'll tell you why. Why are these little bits of paper called money valued at all? There's only one reason. The promise that they can buy happiness. Now, if you thought all this paper could do is buy misery, you'd throw it out in a heartbeat. It's the promise that with money, you can buy happiness. The trouble is, it is a shaky promise. Meaning, I know depressed billionaires. It's not working. But these rituals, if you find a ritual that can, without any money, double your happiness, what do you think's more important? A bit of paper with the promise that it can buy happiness, whether it does or not, or a ritual that actually creates happiness? And you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for it to arrive or whatever. You do a little 10-minute process. Your happiness goes up double. Hello? Why is no one raving about this? Why is I made an extra $100,000 this year such a big deal, as opposed to I just doubled my happiness by learning a new way to talk? and I'm enjoying it every night with the woman I love. Why isn't that more important? Because remember, the paper is a symbol of value. It has no value. It is a symbol. It used to be backed by gold, which is also a symbol. You really want to lug lunks of gold around traveling? Who wants heavy metal? It's a joke. Who wants it? It's the promise that you can give it to something for something you need that will bring you happiness, or that will keep you alive another day so that you have the chance to feel happiness. You don't want to keep alive another day so that you have the chance to be miserable. Meaning if money just keeps you alive so that your torture is perpetual because you're unhappy, and it keeps you alive another day so that you can experience another day of unhappiness, only an idiot is interested in that. And ironically, it is moments of joy, moments of love, moments of happiness, moments of delight that make us want to live another day, and that thus make us want to earn more money, which then makes us want to learn the skills of making money more gracefully. That leads to abundance emotionally, mentally, and physically. Because just having tons of money and not knowing how to enjoy yourself, let alone the money, is a waste. It means you're consuming natural resources right and left for your Mercedes, your this, your that, and it is a complete waste because you don't enjoy any of it. You don't enjoy your Mercedes as much as someone doing some eye-gazing rituals enjoys their surfboard. Surfboard, $200, Mercedes, $100,000. You want to invest your energy, your money, your attention, your mind, your heart, your body in a way that brings well-being for you, those you love, and then in Maslow's final hierarchy of need, transcendence. Once you've learned security, survival, well-being, once you've created an aesthetic, once you're proud of who you are, there's nothing more satisfying than transcending the limits of this body and doing something that Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX. The dream of giving everything to help this species become multiplanetary, in the clear awareness that there have been plenty of periods in human history where the human population was almost wiped out by asteroids, fires, earthquakes, and the various temperature changes, the ice ages and all that, and dinosaurs wiped out. And the generosity of wanting to give a gift, wanting to develop a whole company, a whole technology, cut the costs of rocket propulsion by more than 60%, just so that if something bad happens, it's kind of the emergency fund. We've got, a baseline of civilization. We don't have to, reinvent, the computer or something and stuff, because it was all, the whole electrical grid was fried and all that. So we go to transcendence, and real meaning. It's a beautiful evolutionary process, very satisfying. So when you learn rituals and protocols are another slightly more formal thing. We tend to think of rituals as being more right brain, dressing a certain way, an altar, something I've talked about, setting flowers, maybe crystals, maybe singing and dancing, more right brain stuff. Protocols are left brain. A protocol is something like, let's have an agreement that we don't interrupt each other until 10, 20 seconds after finishing talking. let's have a protocol that we pick 3 topics that we'd really like to cover in this evening's time together. And if we get on to other things after those are richly delved into, fine. But let's actively stem off the probability field that just says we'll be dissing out gossip about Harry and Sally for 2/3 of our events, and then kind of once we realize the evening's coming to an end, it's like, oh yeah, what were you going to talk about that's important? You know, it's a joke. So protocols, what do you want to talk about? Protocols such as, what would be a peak experience? Is there any way that we could imagine creating a peak experience tonight? What could be done? You know, I once met a woman dancing blindfold, where we met for the first time, blindfolded, and contact improv dancing. And we designed the ritual. And after 30 minutes of dancing together, we opened the blindfolds, and I saw the most beautiful face I'd ever seen, because you're in an altered state dancing. It's part of the beauty. And then we proceeded with our ritual, an absolute peak experience. How much did the blindfold cost? $2. Do you think that was worth more than the Mercedes or less? Depends on your scarcity mentality. If you know you can survive, I'd go for a meeting like that over a drive in a Mercedes any day. So that was a fun encounter as well. I met a woman in Vegas for a peak experience where we met at the airport, headed off to a Cirque du Soleil and dinner show, and called it a night. You know, it was just a fun, let's on the glamour blitz, glitzy side of peak experience. What's your protocol for doing that? Group size, as I said, the values. For me, honesty, transparency, win-win, sustainability. Sustainability is a really big one for me. I can't stand being around a taker. Oh, that's an interesting topic. Tell me more about that. Give me another glass of water. Now I don't want to massage your feet. Now tell me more about this. And it's just a constant thing. Like, let's have a value as the foundation of the relationship, that we each contribute equally to creating an exceptional experience. And it's not that we contribute in the same way. I may bring most of the money, they may bring most of the enthusiasm, I may bring most of the ideas, they may prepare the meal. Let's dance to create something where we both feel that we've received more at the end of the event together than the beginning. That's sustainability. And of course, it begins by knowing ourselves, because I always ask people, what would you like to do? What would bring out the best in you? What would you enjoy talking about? What would make you 10 out of 10 enthusiastic? What would you love to taste if you could imagine any dish? Of course, if the person has no idea, it's harder to have a sustainable relationship, because if they say, no idea, and then you turn on your favorite music and they're like, yeah, I don't like that. So you do have an idea, you just don't know what you like, you know what you don't like. That's kind of driving backwards. Eliminate anything. It's better than nothing. It's better than the person not talking and just having a miserable time and you never learn anything about them. And then they just avoid you because they didn't know how to have a good experience. So they didn't. So then they avoid you, as opposed to learning how to have a good experience by communicating what that experience is. This is lifting. So this is the exercise for the week, is to take this body of ideas and use it to first identify what environment brings out your best self, number one, and then number two, to act on it in 1, 2, or 3 ways with 1, 2, or 3 people. You can create 3 different versions of this. For example, one little exercise I've done from time to time is, as a way to meet a stranger, is we spend an hour on the phone brainstorming what would be a peak experience. This would be an example of a peak experience for me. Meeting like this, eating this, doing this, not doing this, talking about this, smelling like this, like I like essential oils. This. And I say that would be a 9 out of 10 for me. Well, then they say, well, that would be a 6 out of 10 for me. I liked this part, I didn't like that part. Okay, great. They begin. I would like to do this. I'd like to have this food. I'd like to be doing this. I'd like it to last this long. I'd like to talk about this. I'd like to smell like this. I'd like it to be in this location. I'd like it to be in this kind of framework. I'd like you to pay for it. That'd be a 9 out of 10. I say, great idea, but I don't eat that. So if we did that, I would be ordering this. You'd be having that. Does that change your number? Okay, then this, that, and you go back. By the time each person has done 3 to 10 scenarios, by the time you've got 7 montages on the table of great ideas, I have never found a conversation where you could not create a more interesting, a more dynamic, a more beautiful, a more profound interaction than would ever come about by chance. By chance, hey, let's get together and see what happens. Well, where do you want to go? Well, you decide. Well, no, you decide. Okay, well, why don't we meet at Chevy's? Okay. And you just get together. Well, what do you want to talk about? Well, what do you want to talk about? It's very boring what typically happens. But when you design it like this, and it's not a cage. Some people will say, oh, that's a cage. It's so boring. No. It's a starting point. Because what's the rule? What's the key rule in this? If any person at any point in the experience can imagine something better than the imagined best experience, they just pipe up and say, I know we were going to go over to this bar and eat gelato and this, but what I really would love to do is have a midnight walk and hold hands and talk about this. That increases the value of our plan by about 25%. How about you? Well, for me, it's about the same. Okay. Well, it's a 25% increase for me, so let's do it. Or that's an increase for me too. Or no, it ruins it. The whole highlight for me was this. Increases it 25% to do there. It decreases it 50% to lose this. So let's stay with this, or let's talk about another possibility. It's more fun, of course, to do this in advance. And it's a great skill set. It's a great skill set to be able to know yourself that well and to have the courage to be seen. Because the vast majority of people are not going to go into this terrain for one reason. They don't want to be seen because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be judged because they feel and fear they are inadequate. They don't want someone to find out. And that fear that they are inadequate makes them inadequate. Because if someone does not want to be seen, they will not be seen, which means that they will fail at the most important aspect of the relationship, which is intimacy, and that makes them inadequate. Because if there's no intimacy, there's no honesty. If there's no honesty and intimacy, the relationship has failed. The person fearing inadequacy who doesn't want to be seen becomes inadequate. The person who is willing to be seen and keep working. Okay, you didn't like that idea. That was a 2 for you. It was a 10 for me. Okay, next. We're going to keep putting this out there until, without any compromise, both of us are going to be diving headlong into an adventure that an hour or 2 ago we could not even imagine, but is so exciting we don't even know what the end will be. And it's better than watching TV. I will see you on the next blog.